I would like to introduce our first presenter for today, my colleague, Jaclyn Camden. Jaclyn serves as the Assistant Director of the Center on Transition Innovations at Virginia Commonwealth University, the Director of VCU's Inclusive Post-Secondary Education Program, ACE College, and as the Chair of a National Collaborative Employment Partnership Work Group that focuses on policy and system practices and barriers to bringing partners like vocational rehabilitation, schools, and employers together to enhance paid employment for students with intellectual disabilities. In addition to all of this excellent work, she is also a study lead for the VCU-RRTC on employment of transition age youth with disabilities, of which she will be talking about today. Jaclyn.
All right, thank you so much, Stephanie. I'm just going to share my screen real quickly and we'll get started. All right. Well, again, thank you for that introduction, and hello, everyone, and welcome to today's presentation to look at another one of the studies under the Transition RRTC. So as Stephanie mentioned, my name is Jaclyn Camden. I'm a white woman in her mid to late 30s with light brown hair. It's a little longer than mid-length. I'm wearing a black shirt and a pink necklace. I'm sitting in my office and the walls are off-white. There's also a blue and yellow picture in the back with my plant. My pronouns are she, hers, and hers. So today I am really thrilled to kind of dive into our study that focuses on inclusive post-secondary education programs, really looking at how do we increase paid employment opportunities for students with intellectual and developmental disabilities enrolled in these programs. So today I'm going to kick off the presentation by providing a real brief kind of overview of the study titled Effects of Trained Personnel Providing Employment Supports in Education, Higher Education on the Employment Experiences of College Students with Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. So once I go and do the brief overview, we'll wrap up and kind of switch gears, and you'll get to hear some insights from Dr. Stephanie Lau, who you just met. She was a VCU Technical Assistance Facilitator on the study, and then we'll also hear from technical assistance participants from the program ROAR at Washington State University. So we're really excited to have an opportunity to hear directly from folks that were impacted by the study today. So the purpose of the study is to examine the effects of the implementation of an online course coupled with a year of technical assistance to inclusive post-secondary education program staff on the employment opportunities and outcomes of college students with IDD that were served by those programs. So for a little bit of context, inclusive post-secondary education programs, or IPSE programs, are college programs for students with intellectual disability, and they often provide academic, employment, and campus engagement support to students. There are currently over 300 reported programs across the country. And while inclusive post-secondary programs do have higher than average employment rates, so they're about 60% of graduates from these programs are employed 1 year after graduation. Think College, which is the National Coordinating Center for TIPSID and IPSE programs, report that in 21-22, only about 38% of students enrolled in TIPSID programs, which are the IPSE programs currently receiving federal funding through the federal grant, have paid employment opportunities, and only about 31 have had paid work-based learning experiences. And not all of these paid experiences are paid at minimum wage. So we do know that though paid employment while enrolled in IPSE programs is a predictor of post-graduation employment opportunities. So we know that paid employment while enrolled is really critical for these programs. Unfortunately, we have found that not all staff that develop and implement the programs have a background in that employment supports or have the knowledge to implement employment in IPSI programs. So we really wanted to see if providing that professional development directly to staff that provide employment supports or plan to provide employment supports in IPSI programs would enhance paid employment for students. And we defined paid employment as needing to be at least a minimum wage and at a wage that is aligned with duties and others performing similar tasks. And then working and interacting with peers with and without disabilities that are not a part of the program. And so these paid positions could be competitive or customized position. The study was designed as quasi-experimental, so the participants that completed the course could self-select whether they wanted to engage in technical assistance or not. So we didn't randomize the participants into groups, and I will definitely talk a little bit more about the course and technical assistance and what that looks like in just a moment. But before we get too in depth about the study, I did want to pause and take some time to discuss the impact of COVID. So like the other studies discussed during this conference, we really did need to kind of pivot and adjust due to the impacts of COVID, especially for our first cohort. So we started our first cohort with our first course in March of 2020, just as everything started to shut down and we kind of all became quarantined. So while the course was virtual, so there wasn't really any issues in implementing the course, many college programs that had enrolled were at that point kind of scrambling to make some adjustments and really just trying to stay afloat at that point. So we saw a lot of staff and programs that had high turnover, some financial uncertainty, and issues with implementing just general program components that they already had. So while we did implement that, and we did see over 50% of people that were enrolled in the course, we only had one program enroll in TA. So we had really good numbers for the course. We had a pretty decent completion rate for just implementing during COVID, but we only had one program that enrolled in TA. So we made some slight adjustments to the resource questions and shifted to a case study design for cohort 1. But then we were able to kind of resume and go back to the original design for cohorts 2 and 3. One of the positives that I think we were able to pull out was some rich information on what the virtual needs were related to employment in these college programs. So there was a lot of course discussion and TA supports around virtually implementing employment supports and strategies, like how do you job coach remotely? And I think this is really important because kind of that hybrid and remote work really isn't going anywhere. So we are able to provide that assistance and learn a lot about the virtual needs at that time. Right. So for the study, we did have 3 main research questions. First one, which aspects of the online training and TA were most instrumental in providing paid employment or paid internship opportunities for students with IDD while in college? Does providing online training in TA for college personnel increase the number of paid employment or paid internship opportunities for students with IDD while in college? And the third question, what are the employment outcomes for students with IDD post-graduation who participated in paid employment and paid internship opportunities while the program was enrolled in the study? So we're really looking at what was this impact of the professional development, the online course, the technical assistance. All right. So a little bit about what these cohorts went through each year. So as I mentioned, we had 3 cohorts enrolled in the study, and each cohort did receive the same activities. First, we would recruit for participation in the course. So while we opened recruitment to anybody that was a part of an IPSE program that wanted to enhance or improve employment supports, we really targeted those newer TIPSE programs or well-established programs that reported 50% or less engagement in paid employment for their students. Once we recruited and enrolled the course participants, everybody got the same 6-week online course. So the course covered supported employment principles, but really through that lens of how do you do this on a college campus? Because it might look a little bit different than if you're doing supported employment in the community. So we really wanted to focus on that lens of on a college campus. So during the course, we went over things like how to get to know your students, how do you discover their interests, their strengths, their needs, how to engage with employers and conduct job development, how to customize campus jobs, how to provide job site training, and then as the students are moving towards the end of your program, how do you support students to transition out of college into the workforce, into competitive integrated employment. And so the course consisted of short videos, resources, live discussions, extending your knowledge activities, and quizzes. So each week, the enrolled participants would get those activities, and they would engage in about 5 hours of professional development per week. The completers of the course would receive $50 gift card and CRCs. And we had an almost 70% completion rate across the 3 course implementation period. So if a course completer finished the entire course, they were eligible to self-select into receiving a year of free technical assistance. So for those that engaged in technical assistance, they completed a needs assessment and then were able to receive monthly meetings with a VCU facilitator, along with additional resources kind of outside that meeting that met the needs of the program. They also established specific goals and implemented an action plan for the year. So while the course, I describe it, kind of provides that foundational knowledge, the technical assistance or TA was really individualized to meet those specific needs and interests of the program. So for example, some programs really focused on how to conduct job development and secure opportunities that aligned with student strengths and needs. Other programs could get the jobs, but they weren't really successful in supporting students. So we worked on how do you train staff and implement effective job site training supports to ensure that student success once they actually obtain the position. So all of what we did during the year of technical assistance was really based on that individual need of the program. Keeps going. Back one more. There we go. Sorry about that. And then all participants, whether they were in the course or their TA, received a follow-up survey and interview to really collect data on the impact of the professional development activities. All right, now you go next slide. All right, so this slide really looks at some of the demographics. So I just wanted to provide kind of a snapshot of who participated in the study. So we had 73 different colleges and universities, and that included 4-year colleges and universities, 2-year, and even career and technical colleges that enrolled in the course. And then we had 121 individual staff members enroll in the course during the 3-year period. Of those who enrolled in the course, we had 14 colleges and universities that enrolled in technical assistance. And overall, we had representation across 29 states. All right, so while we're still kind of finishing up the post surveys and interviews, we have pulled some themes on what the current needs are around professional development to really continue to enhance paid employment opportunities in IPSE programs. So I wanted to share some of the initial themes that we have been able to pull out. First, I just want to say that programs are really reporting that they want to implement paid employment as a part of their program, but they don't necessarily have the tools, skills, and strategies to do that, and aren't really sure where to find them. And so some of the main themes that really emerge from course discussions and technical assistance are one, moving from unpaid to paid employment opportunities. So a lot of programs, even if they didn't have paid, they had unpaid work-based learning experiences. But sometimes it's hard when you've been working with employers and they've been getting unpaid workers to then move to paid opportunities. So programs are reporting that they kind of are feeling stuck when they built that relationship around unpaid experiences and unsure how to advocate for paid employment. So we talked a lot about that. And then also, how do you restructure your staffing support in order to provide the level of support needed for paid employment? There was needs around how do you align these opportunities with interests? So many programs who had paid employment were more based on availability of positions. So what is open, who's willing to hire, really over interest driven opportunities. So programs wanted some help to figure out how to discover students' interests and then align those with opportunities to make sure that students aren't only getting paid opportunities, but interest-driven paid opportunities. Programs also express need about how do you effectively network? So how do you reach employers? How do you meet employers, whether they're on or around campus? And then how do you do that with limited staff and time? So how do you maximize your efficiency and effort to reach those employers that you need to reach? Data collection was a huge need in these programs. We know that data is very important in whatever we do, but not all the programs are collecting data on what is happening around employment, or programs were collecting a lot of data, but they weren't using it to inform decision-making and practices. Another area of need was connecting and building relationships with vocational rehabilitation agencies in their state or local area. That relationship and that partnership is really huge as an employment support. So there was a lot of expressed need about how do you connect and build those relationships. And then finally, how do you do this all virtually? Like I said earlier, we weren't really expecting this to be a theme or this to be an issue, but we implemented just at the start of COVID. And so there was a lot of needs, and there's a lot of continued needs around how do you provide virtual employment supports, because as I said, remote and hybrid opportunities in the workforce are staying around. They're not going away, I think, anytime soon. All right, so before we kind of move to the panel, I just want to talk a little bit about kind of our next steps, where we're moving into year 5. So we have completed all 3 cohorts, so all 3 rounds of the course in TA, and we're currently completing our post surveys and interviews with all of our participants. So we'll be finishing collecting that. We'll be analyzing the data and reporting out on what we're finding from those post surveys and interviews. We're also working on moving that supported employment course that I talked about to be self-paced and releasing it so others outside the study can access it. And we do currently have a manuscript in publication that looks at cohort 1's case study, and we're also looking at working on another publication that highlights the use of customized employment within IPSI programs. And then again, once we really look at that data from the surveys, then we will do some more write-ups or results, additional manuscripts, presentations, and briefs on that, those follow-up procedures. All right, so that was just kind of a real brief overview of the study, but now we get kind of to the exciting part, the human part of our research. So I know we're all really excited to hear from ROAR. So we do have, again, Dr. Stephanie Lau, who will be facilitating the panel, and she actually worked as a facilitator with this program that she is going to be talking with today. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and Stephanie, I will pass it to you and the folks from WSU.
Thank you so much, Jaclyn. And your leadership on this study has been phenomenal, and I'm so lucky to get to work with you. So yes, this is Stephanie again. And as Jaclyn said, we are really fortunate to be joined today by some amazing people from Washington State University's Inclusive Post-Secondary Education Program, WSU-RRTC. They are Dr. Holly Whittenburg, who is an assistant professor of special education at Washington State University. She is a co-principal investigator on the Washington State University RRRTC TIPSIT grant and works with WSU-RRRTC program to support employment services and person-centered planning. Dr. Whittenburg is also a co-director of the Washington Transition Program. Genna, who is the WSU-RRRTC Employment Service Coordinator and a third-year doctoral candidate in WSU's Educational Psychology Department. Genna oversees all employment and career development related activities for the WSU-RRRTC's program's 25 students. These activities include job coaching, work-based learning, internships, professional development and credentialing, and competitive integrated paid employment. Dr. Marcus Poppen, who is an associate professor of special education at Washington State University, is also here. His work is broadly focused on supporting career development and transition outcomes for youth and young adults with disabilities. And Dr. Katie Abrams, who is currently the transition coordinator at the University of Iowa's REACH program, and she was previously the director of WSU-RRRTC, unfortunately is not able to join us today. However, she was an integral part of the TA team, so we wanted to give her a shout out. All right. So thank you all for joining. So as Jaclyn said, I was fortunate enough to serve as the technical assistance facilitator for this group, and I'm going to be serving as the facilitator for this panel and Q&A session along with Jaclyn. So quickly, if one of you guys would like to give a general overview of WSU-RRRTC.
Excellent. Thank you, Stephanie. And hello, everybody. It's great to go through and look at that attendees list and see a lot of familiar faces out there. So wonderful. And thank you, Stephanie and Jackie, for having us and for getting us all set up. So, WSU-RRRTC is a 2-year inclusive post-secondary education program, or an IPSC, for students with intellectual and developmental disabilities located in Washington State University on the eastern side of the state. We're a relatively young program, though every year, we get another year under our belt. We served our first group of students in 2018, and in 2020, we received funding through the U.S. Department of Education and the TIPSID programs to support further expansion and development of our program. So we are a residential program with 25 students. So our students are living on campus, within the dorms or within the apartments on campus, and that we are what is called an approved comprehensive transition program. So this is an approval through also the U.S. Department of Education. So our program has several big pillars that are guided by person-centered planning. These pillars include a focus on academics, and so we have students enroll in 2 audit courses a semester. They're also taking 3 WSU ROAR specific courses, one in digital literacy, one in independent living, and then we've got one on career development and professional training. So kind of learning about in employment in the world of work. Then, as we've got a focus on what we're here to talk about today, we also have a big emphasis on employment and work-based learning and work experiences that are a piece of that program, where we try to create about 10 hours a week of structured employment opportunities for each one of our participants. We also include independent living support and inclusive campus and community participation. So that's kind of a big overview of what the program is. Holly and Genna, would either of you like to add anything to that?
Did we talk about the residential component, Marcus?
We've got students that are, just that students are residential and they're living in either apartments or within the dorms.
Okay. Well, thank you for that very comprehensive overview. So I think this is, we have one question that's kind of in the QA related to like the number of individuals that participate in the course versus TA. So what was it for you guys that made you decide to request TA after completing the supported employment course?
I will take the first swing at that. Hi, everyone. I'm Holly Whittenburg. I am a white woman in my 40s with dark hair that's shoulder length. Today I'm wearing a white sweater and I have a lovely backdrop of the WSU campus around fall behind me. So I will say that there were a couple of reasons or thoughts that we had as a team and why we wanted to request technical assistance. First, our team learned so much from the course, right? Like there were just so many kind of essential skills and knowledge and kind of connecting pieces together that we got out of doing the course. But we also knew that we wanted to have additional opportunities to really have the chance to apply what we had learned and having guidance and support in doing that. We were also really wanted, Marcus mentioned we're on the eastern side of our state. We are nowhere near Seattle. We are not where the people are. We are where the land is. So we are in a very rural area, a very small town. So we also we knew that there were individualized components or things going on that we really wanted that individualized help in identifying and developing strategies and approaches that would work for our students within our specific rural context. So taking those kind of needs and wants, and also knowing, just me personally having worked for and worked with VCU before, I knew that just the knowledge and the expertise and the research experience and what we would get out of that technical assistance, that we were going to get really excellent coaching that was going to be individualized to us and to our needs. And Stephanie, we just all looked so forward to those monthly meetings with you, because it also became this place and space for us to kind of like debrief and think deeply about things that oftentimes in the day-to-day we wanted to, but we didn't have time to, right? So I think all of those things together were some of the reasons that we were like, no, we want technical assistance too, please.
Yeah. So that might kind of go into the next question, but I remember you guys talking about that you just are, I think like anyone else here who's ever been part of an IPSI program, understand how many moving pieces there are. And that a lot of times there were sometimes efforts that were even being duplicated among your team members because you just didn't know that the other person was already doing it. So my next question is, what was the biggest benefit of technical assistance for you?
That's a great question. I think that, to add on to So, I think that some of the biggest benefits were having a structure in a space for us to meet on that regular basis. And that moreover, that it was that we had you there, Stephanie, as sort of this neutral party and as a facilitator, which helped lead us through this process. So not one of us had to worry about kind of setting the agenda and taking the notes and thinking about the goals and thinking about all of those pieces. We knew that we could rely on having an external facilitator, which allowed us to free up some of that administrative capacity and really focus and think more about the work that we were doing. So, having been a part of TA in the past and having been a TA provider, that it really does provide a lot of support for those programs to have those types of administrative tasks and burdens taken off the responsibility of the team, so that really we can kind of free up and really think more critically about the work that we were doing. So I think that structure and that space was really, really important. And then having that you as a facilitator who's neutral, and we're able to take notes, we're able to support with that accountability, that those are a couple of those biggest benefits. I would also say from a more concrete standpoint around like what we accomplished is, where we were at with the program is really growing. So I think when we started, we were probably serving between 6 and 10 students. Now, as you heard, we're serving 25 students. And so that year that we were participating in this capacity, this technical assistance, is when we really were growing sort of that employment component. So we knew how to do it with 4 students. We knew how to do it with 6 to 8 students. But how can we take this and really expand it when we've gotten increasing enrollment? And a part of that was building those partnerships with community members and sort of the structure on going out and learning about how to build those relationships with community partners, that emphasis on paid work. So I vividly remember an experience where I think, Jaclyn, you were talking about this earlier, where we had somebody who was doing a non-paid internship, and we wanted to get that student into a paid work experience. And so we worked with you, Stephanie, to brainstorm some opportunities and some ideas to be able to approach that employer, really for that student to approach that employer, to be able to request and advocate for that paid work experience. And so I think that was really a product of the work that we did together. And then, that overall thinking about that scope and sequence of what we were doing within our program to be able to, when a student's coming in their first semester, what are things looking like? What are we doing? And how does that evolve throughout the four or more semesters that students are enrolled? So those are some of the biggest benefits of technical assistance that I took away from. I don't know, Holly and Genna, do you have other things to add?
Yeah, I think just to add to that, having a more comprehensive team, right? Because I know I came into technical assistance with some background knowledge of supported employment, but not a significant amount. So I think it was really helpful to be able to lift my level of understanding, to be able to more critically engage in our broader employment services team. So that was particularly helpful and a benefit for myself, and I think our team overall.
And I also think just having concrete, like the goal setting, right? And having measurable goals, right? I think we were all very committed to being we want to improve paid employment experiences and increase them for students. But what literally having here's our goal, and, having that as kind of our, I don't know, our beacon, or what we can always go back to, and kind of a measure, and then being able to celebrate as we achieved goals was, it just felt really good. And I think that was an important part of it as well.
I think that's a great reminder, because I know there were some times where I would be like, I forgot what your goals are. Let's go back and revisit them. Oh, look, you met it. But I just, to add on to that, I want to say this is, I remember when I started working with all of you as a facilitator, that you guys were not a novice group when it came to supported employment. I know, Genna, you said you didn't have as much, but you had a pretty good foundation. And then I know Holly personally had a very strong foundation. And so it's I really liked your answer, Marcus, of how even a group that has a foundation in supported employment and understands the importance of paid work experiences, we're still able to benefit from it. And in your case, kind of a scale up capacity to increase to 25 students, which is a lot. Genna, I hope you're getting some rest. But so the next question to be a little bit more critical, what challenges did you experience during technical assistance? Because again, we've talked about time is difficult for anyone in an IPSI program.
Yeah, so this is Holly again. I think we've touched on a few of them. There were some, I would say, some soft or some growth challenges, and then there were also some kind of specific things as well. So as Marcus mentioned, we're a young program, WSU-RRTC. So really, we embarked on this technical assistance at the same time as we had received a TIPSID grant the year before. We were committed to growing student enrollment in our program and strengthening the different components and aspects of it. So we were doing this piece on top of that. So I think there was just some challenges there and kind of balancing or giving the weight and the time and the effort that were needed to different priorities within our program. We were also a new team. Like all of us were new, relatively new to our positions and to the work that we were doing. So we were doing this technical assistance and this planning things together, but we were also learning how to work together. We were getting to know each other and kind of figuring out how can we be effective collaborators, right? Then there was COVID, as Jaclyn mentioned earlier. So we were figuring out how to come back onto campus after a year that was spent virtual. And so those were some of the kind of the contextual things. I think some of the other pieces too was one, we didn't have, at that point in time when we started this, we had one full-time staff member, Genna, and I'm looking, 3 GAs, graduate assistants who were both instructing and providing services. We had peer allies who were undergraduate students who volunteered to support. So we also had to figure out how do we want to provide high quality services, but how do we do that? How can we leverage funding to increase the number of job coaches? How do we recruit those? Who are those people? I think one of the really interesting things that came out of technical assistance was this idea of kind of employing undergraduate students looking for some part-time coaches, using federal work study as a way to potentially fund that, tapping in and recruiting from our teacher preparation program, and then figuring out the professional development and the training and the supervision that those people would need in order to be effective at the work that we're asking them to do. So Genna, Marcus, I don't know if other things come to mind for y'all. Those were a couple of that were in my brain.
Yeah, I think, Holly, to your point of kind of the responsibility mapping of that, because even like my role has now shifted from when we first started receiving technical assistance, and it actually shifted like halfway through our technical assistance. So again, like having to reframe what our responsibilities are as members of the employment services team, I think was a challenge that we kind of fluttered around for a while, but then we got to have pretty targeted conversations of what are the faculty advisors, right? Yourself and Marcus, kind of what are your responsibilities, and then what are the boots on the ground people's responsibilities? Figuring out kind of that, not necessarily hierarchy, but that kind of collaboration map and that organizational map, I think was tricky, but we figured it out.
So, and it sounds like, Holly, you guys have kind of already touched on this a little bit, but giving you the opportunity in case there's been more changes. But how did your program change after your participation in TA? And what did you implement based on those TA discussions?
Yeah, I think that's my question. So I think one of the pieces, oh, and hello everybody. My name is Genna. I'm a white mid-20s adult. I have long brown hair, tattoos, and glasses. My pronouns are she and they. And today I'm wearing a black shirt with a virtual background of the WCU campus, also in the fall season. Holly, Marcus, and I actually all have the same virtual backgrounds. But anyway, to answer your question, Stephanie, I think one of those pieces that Holly had touched on a bit is that job coaching model. I think we really expanded that throughout the course of our technical assistance, right? First piloting it through a work study and then seeing the impact of that allowed us to kind of leverage some of the advocacy that we were doing with donors to our program, and to like the broader recruitment throughout the university. So we went from having one job coach to having 7 job coaches the following year that still stayed primarily within employment. And now we have a staff of 14 program-wide coaches who support employment, independent living, and social skills. So we've had an opportunity to cross-train them to address multiple needs of our students. They also support with our academics. And we also drastically improved our paid employment rates, shifting from paid employment in the 20 to 25% range. And I remember one of our concrete goals was hitting 65% paid employment. And we did do that through the course of our technical assistance, which I think is one of the biggest achievements that I feel, because again, coming back from COVID, figuring out that team piece, it felt like we weren't serving our students as well as we could. But we're figuring it out. And I think we figured out processes and like formal processes and kind of documentation processes that help us better support our students and better collaborate, rather than, like you said, repeating the same things over and over again and not necessarily working comprehensively. Holly always came back to the statement of kind of working smarter, not harder, right? So when we collectively work together as a team, I think that really improved our program overall, not only our employment services, but it started to expand to all domains of our program, which I think is a really big shift. Marcus and Holly, do you all have anything to add?
But Genna, that was such a nice response. As I was thinking about that, it's been a little while since we've really had a chance to talk about these things, and it's nice to have a space even just to debrief what that experience was like. I got just this huge warm fuzzy feeling thinking about growing that employment rate, and just virtual high five to everybody. I mean, when we think about the purpose of these programs and we think about the work what we're doing, having that paid work experience begets more paid work in the future. So just think about that as being one of those huge changes when we think about trying to increase that opportunity. I also think that structure, these standing meetings, to support this team. I think, Holly, you were talking about the way that we jive and gel together, right? And so, having that opportunity to formulate those relationships, again, with that facilitator in there, taking off those burdens of somebody having to set agenda, someone having to take notes, someone having to drop the ball, right? It kind of created this opportunity for us to really just get down and do the work together. And I think that those changes have stood throughout the program as we go on it today. So, yeah.
And the other piece that I think was like Genna, I think about the number of different business partners that we have both on campus and in our local community, right? And I think technical assistance and ideas of how we could build those relationships and like kind of concrete strategies for connecting with employers and ways to bring them in and for us to go out, right? I think part of what's driven that increased paid employment work experience rate is those partnerships that we've developed, and technical assistance. That technical assistance process gave us ideas and strategies for how to do that both on and off campus in our local community.
Which, I just add real quickly that idea of those reverse career fairs, right? And I know that was something that I think we started that notion a little bit before the TA, but it kind of was that the technical assistance really did allow us, I think, to put more emphasis on on a reverse career fair, where we had all of those 30, 40 community employer partners that would come, and we'd do a big reverse career fair where our students would do posters and videos and have different information about themselves. And then the employers would walk around and meet those different students on a pretty structured schedule. And I think that resulted in some of those paid opportunities that students have today. So just wanted to remember that change as well.
Yeah, no, I remember you guys did the reverse career fair during the year of technical assistance, and you were so excited. I was in awe. You guys did an amazing job putting that together. So I have one last question of kind of the panel session, but I think it's an important question, so I want to make sure we get to it, which is, what, in your opinion, are additional professional development that is needed across the board related to paid employment in order for IPSI programs to really move forward in the field?
Yeah, I'll take a first swing at that one and then put it out to Genna and Marcus. I think one of the things that's challenging, we touched on it a little bit, right? But folks who are working in IPSIs oftentimes have strong education backgrounds, but not so much. They might not have done as much with employment, right? So thinking about what are those essential skills and competencies that job coaches and folks who are supporting students in employment within IPSEs might need in order to move that paid employment needle forward, and kind of targeting professional development to those specific skills and competencies, as well as increasing support for businesses. Sometimes, I mean, I think we've struggled with this, right? Like, is this idea of like, how do we support so many students with the number of staff that we have? And sometimes that means that fade happens fast, right? So, but that also means like making sure that businesses have what they need as well to feel comfortable and confident in teaching students and supporting students who are within their context as well. And then I think another conversation that we've been having a lot around is that, like, even kind of mapping and understanding what some of these different models of how employment services are being delivered across IPSEs, because I think this is such a new field and a new thing that it's really hard to even know. I don't think we quite know as a field yet exactly what are these different types of models that are being provided, that different programs are using in order to provide employment services to students with ID. So, and maybe knowing that will help us to think about what specific professional development might be needed as well.
Those are some excellent points. Genna, Marcus, anything else you'd like to add to that?
Holly hit on all of those ones that I was thinking about. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think that when you said that most people in IPSE programs have generally an education background, that was a big aha. Yes, especially when we were doing the technical assistance. How many people are really comfortable in the education side of IPSE programs, but then when it comes to the supported employment focus, really kind of having to learn on the job how to support people with disabilities in employment. So.
Yeah, emphasizing that once you've seen, every IPSC program is different. And, I remember us having conversations about your scope and sequence. It's almost like an opposite to sort of the work that we're doing around how do you label, everyone has a different context. And so how do we create this menu of options? I mean, when we talk about professional development needs, what can paid employment, what can employment support look like within an IPSE program, right? And so there's a lot of different approaches that it take. Some don't emphasize it at all, or as much, or maybe not until the end of it. What are those different models that people can take? And what we don't have a research base on that yet.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And those are really great points. I'm taking notes. So now we get to the question and answer, where we have a few questions. Some have already been answered by type. So if you typed your answer and you don't see it still open, please go and check the answered tab where there have been some typed responses. But Jaclyn, if you want to come back on and ask, I know there's one question that you said that you wanted to answer live.
Yeah, so there were several questions in there. And I think most of them are actually for Roar, but there was a question around thoughts or possible explanations for having 73 enrolled in the course and only 14 enrolled in technical assistance. And I think that there are a lot of explanations for that, but the primary would be the impact of COVID. So as I talked about earlier, we implemented that first course in March, and really we're moving into the first year of technical assistance in August, September. And so a lot of programs we're just trying to figure out how to even run their program when everything was virtual. And we still saw that impact, even though each year we had increased numbers enrolled in technical assistance. And I think if we would continue it, we would continue to see increased numbers. But I think the largest impact was COVID and a lot of the programs just trying to kind of pivot and adjust. because the technical assistants did take a lot more time and effort than just the course, because it wasn't only the monthly meetings, but as you hear from, WSU, you then had to implement what you talked about. You had to go and you had to make adjustments, and implement these strategies. So a lot of programs were just saying that this isn't the right time. We just don't have the time for that at the moment. So I would say COVID had the largest impact.
So I see another question, I think from for you, Jaclyn, that I think would be a good one to answer, which is, this person said that they're not familiar with the literature, but they wanted to kind of know what are the evidence-based reasons for paid versus unpaid employment in college, and you wanted to take a stab at that.
Sure. So we've seen a lot of research and information coming out from the Think College team, Meg Riegel, and Claire, Kate, Deborah Hart from out there, that really highlights that paid employment is a predictor of post-school outcomes. Unpaid career related experiences are not a predictor of post-school outcomes. And so certainly there's things like resume development that might enhance your ability to obtain a job, but it's really those paid employment experiences that predict those outcomes. And, we're in college to get prepared and graduate and obtain employment. So if we're really looking at what are those things that get us to those post graduation outcomes, the research is telling us that it's paid employment, also things like inclusion on campus and in academics, but the paid employment is really critical because we just don't see those outcomes with unpaid experiences.
So I'm going to kind of combine two questions that I saw that I think Genna has typed answers specific to how ROAR works, but I think it'll be good for WSU and Jaclyn as a representative ACET to also talk about relationship and working with VR. If we work with VR to help with funding and also transition from graduation to post-college employment. Genna, if you want to go first, and then maybe Jaclyn.
Yeah, I have a couple points to that. So historically, our collaboration with DVR has largely been referring students to their services upon transition out of our program. But we have kind of decided to begin partnership with DVR significantly earlier in our students' journey throughout our program. So our students that did not already have a DVR case open in the state of Washington actually opened one at our local DVR office for Whitman County in Pullman. So that way we could begin collaborating more, have their experiences within ROAR included in their individualized plan for employment, and also to collaborate on things like not only job placement, but also some of the financial needs that our students have of obtaining uniforms or transportation or financial support for formal training. Those are all pieces that we can provide the support like through job coaching, but we don't necessarily have the dollars to be supporting that financially. So I think that's been a really prominent piece. And this is by far the most involvement I have personally had with DVR since I started working with ROAR in 2020.
Jaclyn, next 4 minutes. You want to provide an answer for VCU ACET in college?
Yes, so here at our program, we have a really strong partnership with our state VR. And so we have VR counselors really involved from kind of pre-application to post-graduation. So one, they do provide some funding for students to attend. And just like Genna said, they pay towards the program fees, also towards tuition and university fees, but they also might pay things for like books and supplies and meals on campus and transportation. And so when we have a student that has a VR counselor, we work very closely with them to make sure that the student's interests and goals align with what's happening in the program, as well what's their plan is at VR. And then we work very closely and invite them to team meetings to make sure that they're a part of what's happening and engaged and have input. And as students are transitioning out, and if they're going to be moving to a community rehabilitation provider to get supported employment supports, we work closely with that job coach, the VR counselor, to make sure those the transition of supports is very kind of seamless. They're a very critical partner for our program and has been since day one.
And I think that kind of goes to what Marcus was talking about earlier is in my experience with technical assistance, and Jaclyn, feel free to jump in here too, but it's also, we do see the relationship with the state VR can vary depending on the program, the state, from all of the different variables at the level of the university to the state agency, et cetera.
Well, yeah, and I just want to one more note on VR, and something that, we talk a lot about in technical assistance is, the goals of IPSE programs in VR really do align, especially when the goal of the IPSE program is employment. So having those paid employment opportunities, showing those employment outcomes, you're more likely to have partners like VR on board because your missions and goals really align. So I think is another reason that really having that employment as a focus of your program is so important, especially with the relationship with those agencies.
Well, thank you everyone so much for these really insightful responses. I'm seeing the Q&A blow up, so I know that it's generated a lot of conversation. If we were not able to answer your question live or type, we are collecting all the questions so that we will be able to hopefully respond to them at a later point. And again, if you go and look at the agenda on the conference page, the main contact for each presentation is shared. So you feel free to email them if you have some more specific questions. Jaclyn, it looks like you might have been invited to Canada. So
I am ready to go. Maybe not towards winter, but this summer I'm ready in there.
Well, thank you so much, Jaclyn, Holly, Genna, and Marcus, and Katie, and Absentia. It was a joy working with you guys, and I'm hoping that I get to see you somewhere else again soon. Maybe Washington, Marcus, maybe Florida. Thank you.